Welcome to the BluStar Application Server Advanced Configuration Tutorial, Module 1. In this tutorial, we'll cover the following topics. I'll give you an overview of Bandwidth Manager. We'll look at Bandwidth Manager policies, and then I'll go through a step-by-step procedure on how to set up and configure 3 locations using Bandwidth Manager. We'll look at video bitrate settings where you can set and limit the transmit and/or receive video bitrate. This is the setting you'll want to use if you have a user with an asynchronous connection. I'll demonstrate how to set up user groups and device groups. I'll go through how to set up a VPN connection on both the server and the BluStar 8000i terminal. I'll add picture ID to my user accounts. And in the last module, I'll show you how to upgrade the firmware on the BluStar 8000i terminals. Bandwidth Manager is an optional feature that gives you, as the administrator, the ability to control the amount of bandwidth that your BluStar users will use between network locations. Bandwidth Manager is not used when calls are made within the same network location. Each BluStar user has the potential to generate up to 6 megabits of bandwidth per multi-way call across networks. With Bandwidth Manager, you have the flexibility to allow large amounts of bandwidth at some locations, or links, while restricting the bandwidth on other links. Before I get started, I want to lay out the scenario for the network I'll be using in this example. While it is understood that each customer's network, number of BluStar users, and infrastructure are unique, keep in mind that this tutorial is a guide and that you will need to determine the exact settings you will be using based upon these variables for your installation. So for my scenario, I have 3 locations. The first location is in Canada. It's my corporate office, and I have 10 BluStar users at this office. This is also where my BluStar Application Server, or BAS, will be located. The second location is a remote office in the US. I have 4 BluStar users at this office. The third location is for 1 user with an 8000i terminal located in Europe. Each of these locations have different bandwidth requirements. For this tutorial, the Canada corporate office has 100 megabits of bandwidth. My US office has a dedicated connection to the corporate office with 10 megabits of bandwidth, and my user in Europe has a 6 megabit connection to their internet service provider. This user will connect back to the Canada corporate office through a VPN connection. One last thing I need to tell you before we begin is that Bandwidth Manager policies are applied to IP addresses and IP address ranges. This means that IP addresses of the BluStar 8000i terminals must use static or reserved DHCP addresses. So for my Canada corporate office, my IP address range will be 10.70.109.130 through 10.70.109.159. My US office has a dedicated connection to the corporate office and will use the IP address range of 10.70.109.160 through 10.70.109.180. And my user in Europe will connect through a VPN connection with a reserved DHCP IP address of 10.70.109.190. So let's take a closer look at Bandwidth Manager. From the web user interface, in the menu bar click on Services, then click on Routing Rules and Bandwidth Manager. There are 2 steps to configure Bandwidth Manager. The first step is to name the network and define the IP address or IP address range. The second step is to name the link. Here you will define the location, select a policy, and define the bandwidth. So that's an overview of Bandwidth Manager.